Mark 16, so that's 1023 again if you've lost your place. 1023, Mark chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early, on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You were looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Have you ever been in a car when the driver suddenly slammed on the brakes? You sat staring out the window, maybe sat watching some TV in the back, and then you're thrown forward in your seat. Your seatbelt does its very best to saw you in half. And you just have to ask, don't you, why did we stop? What was so important, so dangerous, or so urgent that the driver had to slam on the brakes and sort of bring you up so uncomfortably? That's a little bit like how Mark's gospel ends. After taking such care, like we've seen in describing the events of Jesus' trial and his death and burial, these three ladies go to find Jesus' body, don't, then run away confused and afraid. It's like Mark slammed the brakes on. We've taken a whole chapter and then just 8 verses and we're done. And we've got to ask, don't we? Why? Why does it end this way? I mean, it's a weird ending to a book, isn't it? The answer is because it demands a response. You can't hear this and then sit back and do nothing about it. It drags you into the story. It demands that you do something. So we're going to think quickly this morning, and it will be quickly, about how we could respond. Well, you could deny it, couldn't you? You could just reject this whole story as being untrue. You could say that it didn't happen. It didn't happen the way it's described here. And hundreds, thousands, millions of people have responded that way. Now we know, don't we? We're not stupid. We know that dead bodies don't just disappear in the space of a few days. We know that dead people don't get up and start walking around. And so, I guess in a way, the rational thing seems to be to deny that this could have happened, because it just doesn't fit with what we know about the world. It must be made up. It must be false, not true. Only, just to ask a few questions, if the tomb wasn't empty, what happened to Jesus' body? Because if it was still there in the tomb, when people started going around saying that Jesus had risen, the soldiers and the Jewish authorities could have just got it out and shown them. And you think the way they've treated Jesus, they're not going to be bothered about disrespecting his bones, are they? They never did. They told the story that the disciples, if you read it in Matthew 28, they told the story the disciples came and took it away, but they never produced the body. If it was still there, that would have been the easiest thing to do. Another question. If this was made up and Mark is just telling tales, then why would he say that it was the women who were the first to see the empty tomb? Now, we don't think about it much these days, but in those days, people just didn't believe women. They didn't think they were smart. They didn't think that they told the truth. And so they just didn't trust them. Now, if you were making this up, this story about Jesus rising, you would want to make it as believable as possible, wouldn't you? Because you're already working against the fact that people know dead people don't come back to life. So, with that, you can't do anything about that. That's the heart of the story. But you try and add the other stuff to make it a bit more plausible, a bit more easy to believe, wouldn't you? But Mark writes that it's the women who were the first there. The simplest explanation is because that's what happened. As a last little question on this response, if Jesus didn't rise, how do you explain the church? I mean, all Christianity. How do you explain why the apostles, Jesus' disciples, would die, not just for something they believe, because people will die for all kinds of silly things if they believe in it, but they would die for something that they knew wasn't true. If they'd stolen the body, like the Jewish authorities said, and they knew Jesus hadn't really risen, and yet they would all be willing to die for it. Who dies for a conspiracy that they've made up that doesn't gain them anything? How do you explain the life and hope and joy that the risen Jesus has brought to so many people? If you deny this because of the evidence, then maybe you need to go and look at the evidence again. Because the evidence that we have says that the tomb was empty because Jesus walked out of it. And we've got a couple of books on the back if you want to look at that. Well, if you don't deny it, let's look at another response. You could be left, as it seems these women were left, and where Mark leaves us in this account, confused and afraid. And confusion and fear are natural responses to the empty tomb. Now, if you went to visit the grave of someone you loved and you found it empty, you would be confused and afraid. And you've got to wonder about all these questions, haven't you? How could the tomb be empty? What has happened? Something has to have happened to empty this tomb. And you're left wondering what that means. Have they come and taken him away? Have they come to desecrate his body even more, to dishonour him even more? And then it gets worse for these women, doesn't it? Angels appeared here in Mark, one angel, or a man dressed in white, who could that be? And give them instructions. So it's not just like telling them what's happened, but they tell them to go and do something. What's that all about? And if Jesus could rise from the dead in a way that, like we all know, just doesn't happen normally, then it means that there is more happening in the world than we can see or understand. It means that there is a God who can do impossible, inexplicable things. And that just pulls the rug out from under us, doesn't it? We could be left questioning everything we think we know about the world. Or we could be left paralysed, not knowing what to do or think. It injects a level of randomness maybe, or a level of uncertainty about the most basic facts of the world, and it, at the very least, might leave us feeling deeply uncomfortable. It's kind of the uncanny valley, if you know what that is. There's just something that goes off about everything. Can we expect the sun to rise tomorrow? The natural consequence of cause and effect seems to break down. Surely anything could happen. The world becomes completely unpredictable. And that is frightening. Only for all that we could be confused and afraid by all this, like these ladies were. Reading this, and we've got a whole Bible, we don't just have Mark 16, 1-8. We've got the bit that's added afterwards, we've got the rest of the Gospels. We know, don't we, that they don't stay confused and afraid. That's where Mark chooses to leave them in his account for a reason. But that's not how they stayed. Something happened after this that turned all that confusion and fear into joy and certainty. So we're left again looking for answers as to why that is. So how else could we respond? One last one here. We could respond the way that Mark wants us to respond. The way that these three women responded. The way millions, if not billions of people have responded since Mark first wrote these words. With faith. We could believe. Mark ends his gospel, the story of all that Jesus began to do and to teach. He ends his gospel by inviting us into the ongoing story. It's like Mark ends his gospel by putting those three dots. It's called an ellipsis. You can impress your English teachers with that. Those three dots, as if to say, what happened next? And you can fill it in for yourself. You're invited to meet this risen Jesus and to learn to walk with him. Belief is what turns this confusing, frightening story of impossible events into a picture of the wonderful work that God does through Jesus. This isn't proof that life is chaotic, unpredictable, and random. It's proof that God keeps his promises. It's proof that God won't let sin and death get in the way of him having a people for himself. Proof that God is in control and offers life to anyone who wants it. Do you believe this morning? Because if you do, you're invited into this story. You write your name in that ... at the end of Mark's Gospel. Into the joy of walking with Jesus and drawing others into that same joy. Because this is a joy that we can spread. Now, this Easter day, as we see the story continuing and the joy increasing, isn't that something to celebrate? We're going to sing our last song, Lord, I lift your name on high. Now, I think we are going to have it on the screen. It is in your books, so regardless of what happens, it's 300.